I'll be with you for the next 51 minutes, talking about education again today, if that is your pleasure. We have been on that subject for a couple days, and I think it has been successful, thanks mainly to the number of calls that we have gotten from you. There are teachers home on vacation, there are kids home on vacation. We've gotten calls from students, from regular school teachers in northeastern Connecticut. We've gotten calls from a school board member in Pomfret. We've gotten, yesterday we got two very interesting calls from substitute teachers. One, an active, current substitute school teacher who is substituted in many of the local schools, and I found that call particularly interesting, his insights on the whole subject of discipline and the amount of time that teachers in our public schools are spending keeping order in the classroom. And sort of a corollary to that, I suppose, is the amount of time teachers must spend on different kinds of social and medical and moral and other issues that are not specifically of an educational nature. So I would like to talk on that subject again today, if it's your pleasure. Tomorrow, we are going to be back to the rough and tumble of politics in the real world. We had hoped to have the Attorney General, Mr. Blumenthal, in the studio with us tomorrow. It's looking as though that's not going to work out, that he can come in person, but his office has indicated that he can join us on the telephone tomorrow, and that's almost as good. It only leaves out technically the opportunity for you to phone in and question him directly, because we haven't the ability to do that. So we are expecting the Attorney General on the phone with me tomorrow, and if you would like to call in today with any ideas of questions for the Attorney General, we can fit that in with the discussion today on education. And I know that I have failed in the past to remember to ask the questions that callers have suggested. Sometimes I do it and sometimes I forget, and I'll try and be a good boy. I was thinking, I started the discussion on education on Monday from the standpoint of whether the school year ought to be lengthened, working from an article by Lee Iacocca advocating a longer school year, and that American young people need to be better educated to meet the requirements of industry, his looking at it from the point of view of the Chrysler Motor Company. Yesterday we talked a little bit about sports in school and whether or not there has been too much of an emphasis on sports, or whether our country is simply in decline as a culture, whether we've gotten soft, and whether that is a big part of the problem with our keeping up with foreign competition. We can talk about any of those things again today, but from another point of view, there is the question of the choices that we make, the choices that we individually make about our education, where we will go, when we will go, if we will go at all to high school or to college, when we will go, and a couple of very short essays that caught my attention that were in an education supplement. It's a tabloid thing that was in the New York Times. I had 2 weeks of Times laying in one pile in my home, and I can't remember whether this is from this week's or the weeks before. Sunday New York Times. These are short essays by the governor of New Jersey, Jim Florio, and his wife Lucinda. Let's start off with Lucinda's brief story about her education. It's always been hard to admit one's mistakes, the little ones as well as the larger ones, but I've learned from personal experience that much of the pain can be diminished if you're willing to learn from those mistakes and do something to correct them. I made a mistake when I was younger. I was 17 years old and living in Gloucester, New Jersey, where I grew up, and I dropped out of high school. It was right after my junior year, and looking back, it's easy to see why I did it. At 17, I was impatient. I wanted everything, and I wanted it now. I had a boyfriend who wanted to be my husband. I figured that children would soon follow. I had always known that I would eventually be a teacher, but education, I felt, could be put off and finished later. Marriage and family could not. Besides, I had come from a large family in which I was always taking care of younger children. Leaving school would simply confirm in name the adulthood status that I already practiced. And at 17, a year seemed like an eternity, even if a high school diploma was at the end of it. Langston Hughes wrote a poem in which he asked what happens to the dream deferred, whether it withers and dries up. Well, I know, it shuts down, and in its place an emptiness settles in. For the next 4 years, I would never avoid the feeling of having left something undone, or the knowledge that I was a dropout. Making the decision to go back to school to prepare for the general equivalency diploma test was difficult. My husband at the time accepted my wanting to go back. He just didn't see the point. I had a child, and at the time couldn't drive. My sister-in-law, an active woman with 4 children who lived nearby, announced that she was going to get her GED, so I joined her. The reality of my return was disheartening. I would walk into those evening classes and realize that everything I had known before, the math, the English skills, was lost. Now in my 20s, I also realized that the year that had seemed like an eternity was nothing compared with the years during which, educationally, I would have to work my way back. But once I was in the classroom, my dream returned, the dream that said I was smart enough to go to college, the one that said it was possible to become a teacher. I felt more confident about who and what I was, so confident that even before taking the GED test, I registered at Gloucester County Community College. This time I was impatient to get on with my education, not with what I had mistaken for adult life. I saw clearly that even if that first marriage had not been failing, I was not satisfied being a wife and mother. If I was going to be self-sufficient and self-supporting, I couldn't just get a job. I had to have a profession. College wasn't easy. I was older with a family, and I had to work to pay tuition while attending classes. After 6 years, however, I earned my Bachelor of Arts degree in education at Glassboro State College. I cannot recall a prouder moment or an angrier one. A college degree was something I had had to fight for, something whose importance no one around me had understood, so I couldn't share my elation. And frankly, I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to attend graduation until at the last minute I decided it was important for my son to see his mother graduate from college. You see, I wanted him to go to college. For anyone who considers leaving school, remember, there are no shortcuts. And while the freedom from discipline feels good in the short run, in the long run, you'll be overshadowed by the knowledge that you're a dropout. I've met so many people whose lives have changed because they went back to school and made education a goal. Like me, they understood that you can't really make a claim to happiness if you have to live with unfulfilled dreams. That's the story of Mrs. Governor James Florio from New Jersey. Brennan? No, excuse me. So I thought today a good hook for our discussion would be, have we made a mistake in our lifetime in regard to our education? There are probably a lot of different kinds of mistakes that we could have made. They may be in dropping out of high school, as did Mrs. Florio. They may be in deciding not to go on to college. They may be in going on to the wrong kind of college education. They may be in maybe going to college. Maybe for some people it's a mistake to go to college, particularly right out of high school. A lot of interesting ideas are coming out about deferring college, and many people find it advantageous to go into the armed services first and get GI benefits and do a little growing up. Some of us think that it may be beneficial to go out into the workforce and find out what you really like and what you're interested in and what you're good at, and maybe have a greater appreciation for an education after having been out in the real world and maybe having put a little money aside for it. So if you've made any mistakes that you think might be of benefit to other people to learn from your mistakes, Mrs. Floria hopes that others might learn from hers, give me a call. The number is 928-2721. If you're calling from the Plainfield area, the number is 774-5161. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. I appreciate the article that you just read. And I do understand, though, she's more well-known by the title of being the Mrs. to the governor. So she didn't really quite get it all.
She didn't, I'm sure she has an identity beyond that, but that's all that they refer to her for here. It seems to me that the marriage that she is referring to, where she got married after dropping out of high school, that marriage failed.
Oh yeah, that couldn't be the governor thing.
Yeah.
She had to get that. I just wanted to speak a little about some of the myths regarding education. I watched a wonderful show last night, Bill Moyers talking to Sam Keene, the author, and he has symposiums and things like that on discovering our myths, the things that keep us from being our true selves. Things that our parents pass down to us or society imposes or whatever. It's getting alone and cleaning out some of these cobwebs anyway. And I thought there were quite a few about education, and
are there... did they point out any myths about education, or are these all yours?
They pointed out myths. No. I had these in thinking of that, the myths that we have in our own lives.
Okay.
And I was thinking that some of the myths can also be applied to education. Their myths that they pointed out is like the I and thou and who am I and things like that. But in education, we have a belief that, or a myth, that the only way it can be garnered is by getting out of where we are and going to some classroom and getting it from somebody else. And whoever is truly educated, it comes from, the inner response to the world in which he or she lives and the application of it. So you have to understand, what does education mean to that individual person, and then what are they going to do with it? Can't just go somewhere and get a rubber stamp and said you sat through X amount of classes and you did it and the dream is there. It's a myth. I went to college after a divorce, and I had the kid to start raising all over again by myself. And one of my myths was that I thought that I would not be a person of knowledge until this happened for me. And one of the major part I got from going back was to know that I had it when I went in. But I was just too wishy-washy to believe in myself.
Well,
I had to have someone else verify that I did have that knowledge. I had to see it on paper. So in a way, that was good.
So you were married and you had a child, and when?
I was married and I had 5 children.
Okay.
Came from a battered home and left it after 20 years, and I had a little 3-year-old, and I had to start all over. So I thought the start would be in going to college at the age of 40. And I went to one of the best in Hartford and around, and it was really nice. And I got out of there with an associate's degree, but this is one of the things I found out, that I could have done it if I had a little more confidence in myself and not thought that was the only way. I ended up with all kinds of loans to pay back, a lot of things that could have been accomplished, I think, through other means. Maybe just getting
But at the at the point when you undertook the program of study that led to your associate's degree, you may not have known whether that sheepskin was going to be important to you or not.
Well, at the time, I thought it was going to be the be-all and end-all to prove that I was a worthwhile human being.
Uh-huh.
Whereas I had a lot of low self-esteem, throughout the marriage and things like that. But if I would have just resolved some of these myths before and just liked myself as a person, I think these things could have been, imparted either through some other channel or, through just taking it slow, taking a class at a time. Another thing I found out is you don't need a high school diploma to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go through that myth of getting my GED and all that. That takes 2 or 3 years sometimes if you just go, into it slowly.
I've never seen I've never seen the test or any of the study materials for a GED. How hard a program is that?
It's very, very hard. Very,
it is.
Because they don't want the kids that are in there to think they can just drop out and go take a test and, it's 15 or 16.
So it's no joke.
Oh, no, it's really hard. It's just, some of the classes that I had in college were far simpler.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought that if there is anybody out there that thinks because they don't have a college degree, it's not the total thing. It's not the whole thing. It's a very, very expensive piece of paper.
The problem is that the work world, increasingly in America, places a lot of importance on credentials.
Well, some of this has to stop because in reading last couple of weeks ago, like you, leaving these things on the side and picking them up, the issue of Time magazine, I think was early April 9th or something like that, they had Getting Back to Basics. It has a picture of a pair of trucking boots and a bicycle wheel on it. And I think we all have to do that at one point or another and get what belongs to us, what is going to be meaningful in our life. If it's a college degree for one person, that's fine. You may have 2 kids, and it's fine for one. And like the Sam Keene on Bill Moyers, his brother is a crackerjack mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
So he always grew up believing he knew nothing about mechanics until he took an aptitude test and he got on the top 5%. So it's what is it, instilled in you when you're growing up in your early years and what the importance is placed upon. And I see more and more people saying, the value of an education, and the education that the kids get are our daily walk, the things that we do every day, where we work, what we do, how we treat each other, what we buy, how economy, affairs in our house, and, how kind we are to one another.
Well, I agree with those values as you described them. And, and I think you're right to feel good about yourself and your self-worth. And it's plain to me from having spoken to you before that you've educated yourself and that you continue to educate yourself at home by doing a lot of reading. But I think we can't be naive about what the practical realities are out in the work world. And increasingly, men and women, moms and dads, are having to work in order to keep afloat.
But how many people out there are out of jobs right now that have college degrees? My point in calling is to say that education is a very big word. It does not necessarily mean college. And it isn't only handed out by the public school system.
Yeah.
It is handed out through other means. And you have to just read the lives of the people who went before us, like Footprints in the Sands of Time, Abraham Lincoln and all that. You find out that people do have intellect, do have reason, do have, can be well-rounded without having to go out and pay thousands and thousands of dollars.
Okay.
And being stuck for it when they get out.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Martin.
Yes.
I've been listening to your show, your program all week on education. It's been very interesting.
Thank you, sir.
You've had some very good speakers, and I agree with most of them on their ideas and points of improvement on our education. But we have 2 big obstacles to cross before you can really get your education back system back into the proper working order.
I need you to talk just a little louder. I've heard everything you've said, but just speak up a little.
All right. And one of the big obstacles is, in my opinion, is your teachers' union.
Okay.
Now, you might not agree with that, your wife being a teacher.
Well,
but the other thing
she can speak for herself on that.
The other thing is sports. Sports has overruled our educational system. There's no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
And until these things, these obstacles can be straightened out in our educational system, I don't think we are going to get very far in all the money and effort that we put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing of it is, everyone knows, like these two ladies you just had speaking on there, education does not hurt anyone. It's the biggest improvement in life that anybody can have, is knowledge.
Yep.
Now, that is my opinions, and I've had that in mind for so long, that those two things is what is the biggest hindrance in our educational system.
Well, I certainly think that local school boards and the State Board of Education and policymakers and people in the communities, just lay people like you and I that have an opinion about education and want things to be better, not just locally but generally in the country, that we should not make any assumptions about what we are or aren't going to be able to do because of any entrenched power bases, whether it's the teachers' unions or superintendents or the state government or whatever it is. I think that if you're going to have reform, you have to start with an idea of what it is you want to accomplish, and then worry about how to get there. And so I think that though unions can be frustrating in a process, they don't have to stand in the way of change.
Well, they are one of the strongest lobbies that we have in this country.
Well, there's no question.
They are. They're one of the strongest. And when it comes to where a group of unionists can dictate to the country, the Congress, the states, and the local educational boards, it's gone too far.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Isham Martin on the talk show talking about education. Mrs. Florio, the wife of the governor of the state of New Jersey, has told her story. We'd like to hear your story. Have you made a mistake along the way in your life as it relates to your education that might be instructive to other people listening, maybe school children in northeastern Connecticut, home today, maybe some words of wisdom from some older folks might be useful. Sox are back on their winning ways. We've got the Red Sox right here at 12:45 versus Kansas City. Danny Darwin won his first game for the Red Sox yesterday. It'd be a long summer in the Martin household if the Red Sox weren't in the pennant race, but I think they're going to get things going. The bats started to warm up a little bit yesterday. Let's get back to the phones. Good morning.
Good morning, Archer.
Hi, good morning.
Yes, I totally agree with the gentleman that just called about sports taking over and being the high priority in the school day, right?
Yeah.
And I also agree with him about the union. Now, I've been union all my life, and I'll tell you, as far as unions go, the union is only as strong as you allow them to be. And when they start worrying about, really putting the issue as how much am I going to make a week, or the side of, what can I do for the children? These kids are there. They're sitting there waiting for you to do something for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But when you put your wages before them, I don't think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think?
Well,
or what do you think? Yeah, your wife's the teacher.
Well, I'll speak more generically. See, I know I'm way out on right field on these issues. I don't believe that public employees at any level ought to be allowed to be unionized. It wasn't always this way.
Really?
I really don't. I think
why not?
that.
Wait a minute. I got to ask why not.
Okay, because they're doing jobs that the public has decided need to be done, and we have a democratic process that arrives at what our priorities are as a state or as a town and what we want to accomplish. And we decide how much money we want to spend on the roads or in the schools or whatever, and there's a very open democratic process. And if education isn't being accomplished, or if the roads aren't being taken care of, or the town hall isn't being run well, and the people should be able to discern whether that's a consequence of bad administration or lousy pay or lousy benefits and not getting the right employees. And I think that because how much we pay in taxes and how much of a government we have is so tied into our freedoms as a people that unionizing public employees can have a benefit of the cart leading the horse, and so I've never believed even in the right of public employees to organize.
Well, the only thing is when, for instance, if a person goes to work or goes to school and decides to be a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
They should know what the wages are. They should know what the bad side of it is, along with the good side, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But when they choose to do that, then why turn around and then say, well, you know, you've got to pay me X amount of dollars over what all the average people make, and you know that. I think we all know that they're getting paid, and just figure out every 8 weeks they get a week off. How many workers get a week off every 8 weeks? They get the summer off.
Mm-hmm.
They get how many days off, personal days, you name it. If you look...
Well, the good people don't take the personal days and the sick days that they're allowed to take.
It's there for the taking, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the same way with our people that work for the state. They work a 35-hour week. Stop at any restaurant. Find your state trucks lined up there. They're all in there, not for a cup of coffee, but for a full-course breakfast. Sit back and smoke a cigarette and talk about yesterday or whatever, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All the taxpayers are looking at this.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of all of this, they're making such an issue out of it, and the one that we should be concerned about is Governor Weicker wanting to lay off state troopers. With the rate of crime today, he should be adding on, not laying off, if you know what I mean.
Well, I'm afraid that the troopers probably make enough arrests. I think the problem is in prosecuting people and jailing people. I think the problem is probably not at the police
the court
level.
Okay, it's in the courts.
Yeah.
But you know, I bought a scanner, and I'll tell you, if you listen to these, they are right out straight.
Mm-hmm.
And none of that, I don't think people realize that when they go back to the barracks, they got a lot of paperwork to do, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just them being out on the highway. And when you hear what's going on, and I listen, and boy, it's making me a little paranoid, really.
Mm-hmm.
People busting right through your door, even though you're in your house, and we say we don't need more state troopers, you know?
Well, it's a scary world we live in. There's no question about it.
Sure it is.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Thank you for joining me.
That gentleman that talked before, I think he's right. I don't.
Okay.
Know, as far as too much
sports, too much union power,
and a little less. Huh?
Too much union power, too much sports.
A little too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Good morning. You're on the talk show.
Yes, good morning. I don't think the educators have much to be proud of when you can't even teach the basics. I mean, there's something radically wrong here. I can remember years ago when the teachers, we had dedicated teachers then. It wasn't out for the money. I knew a lot of them. I wish we had more time. I could name them all because they were dedicated and they weren't in there for the money.
Mm-hmm.
And the children, if they saw that the child was having difficulty in learning how to read, in no short order, they were made to read because, I mean, they showed an interest. Mm. Today, all you hear about is, well, there's too many in a class. What's that got to do with it? These people had 25, 30 children, and they didn't get much money. Also, you know, I find that when people had a choice, whether they were to be educated or not. That's great. But some of the people didn't have the choice. They had to do other things in their life because the money wasn't there, number one.
Right.
And does that make you less of a person? Here's another thing. It's okay to be...
I don't think anybody said that. I don't think that it does.
Well, I don't know. Some people don't do anything with their education. They have degrees as long as your arm. And I don't consider myself less of a person because I didn't go to college. No, I don't think so. I worked in stores. I was able to make change, not the cash register. I made the change. And I can speak with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And here's another thing. I'm not being boastful. I don't believe in that. I have humility, which some people lack. The first lady that called, she had it down really pat. And if people all went and became educated, what would happen to the people that build the houses and work on the road and work on the railroads? I mean, there's too much emphasis on that diploma. I mean, there's technical things at a technical school that higher education isn't for everybody. Let's put it that way. And now,
well, I agree that it isn't, and I agree that people's worth, that the world makes judgments about people's worth that are probably not along the lines of the values that you and I may believe in, or what we think the way God looks at us and our worth as individuals. But the reality is that the United States is slipping behind other industrialized nations in our ability to create automobiles and make steel and in computers and electronics and all kinds of stuff that I, having had only a liberal arts education, haven't much of a real comprehension of, and we're slipping behind, and particularly in the science and math skills, and it's going to have consequences for the quality of life in the United States if we don't catch back up.
How can you say that, Isham, when the other people, the whole world is in trouble, and you can't, I mean, maybe there's too much progress, but in the wrong direction. Well, we're going in the wrong direction. We've got to go back to when we were human beings. Today, the people that come out of school, they don't even know how to say thank you for a service rendered for free. What's the matter? There's something radically wrong. Maybe somebody else has got different ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning, Isham.
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Hey, I agree almost with everybody who called in because they all had something good to say, although they didn't say everything good. I went to a one-room schoolhouse where they had 5 or 6 grades in one little room with a potbelly stove. And I found out after I went to a organized school where they had all kind of grades and all different kind of rooms and everything, that I learned as much in that little schoolhouse as I did in that big schoolhouse. And I worked...
What state was the pot-belly stove in?
Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But it was a wonderful experience. It really was.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got older and I found out I had to work even when I was in high school, it wasn't my education that was helping me. It was just being willing to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I graduated high school and I had to get a job. And I was an office worker because I learned how to type in school. But then I found out fee manual labor paid more than office work.
Mm-hmm.
So I quit my office job, and, then again, my education really didn't help out. It was the willingness to work and learn, because almost every job I ever had, they were always willing to train you if you were willing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, I think school is a wonderful experience and a necessary thing. You have to learn how to read and write and arithmetic, and you have to learn how to get along with other people of all different ages. That's one thing about the big schools that I don't agree with. They segregate all the different ages, and people really don't know how to get along with people of different ages then.
Mm-hmm.
And they should have more integrated ages, so that they do more things together as varied ages, But I think your program this week has really been interesting. So many people have so many good things to say. I've really been enjoying it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure.
Nice to hear your voice.
Oh, nice talking to you, too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Isham Martin on the WINY talk show talking about education again today. Have you made any mistakes in your educational life that you'd like to share with us? Right now, let's check Bob Harris, who must have gone to college for meteorology. He'll bring you the forecast brought to you by Safeway Petroleum.
Good morning.
It's 51 degrees in Putnam by the Cargill Falls. We've got more of your good telephone calls coming in, and we'll take them after this. We're back. Let's take some more calls. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Isham.
Hi.
This is a good program you have this week. I've enjoyed your program very much.
Thank you.
I've been in the education business for many years, and going back to the caller that talked about unions, I have an opinion because I have watched this over a period of a half a century. I believe that unions, and not just teachers' unions, but all unions, perhaps is a shelter for the incompetent.
The incontinent?
No, not the incontinent. They may get that way, but I really believe that the caller that talked about dedicated teachers, perhaps this business of dedication and teachers not worrying about their the amount of money that they got and so forth is all tied up with this union business. We paid the dedicated teachers peanuts. They spent many, many hours doing their work, doing a good job, but it was really not recognized by the American public, as it is in many of our trades. And therefore, we brought it on ourselves, and we should work some way to get out of it. I still believe that there's a better way than unionization. I'm not sure. I can't really, excuse me, I can't really define what I would do, but as I've watched it, I know there must be a better way, and I believe that we have the facilities in our country to work that out if we possibly can.
Well, I think that there's a tendency to idealize the past, the good old days, and for people that have been long removed from the school setting to think that all the teachers were wonderful and dedicated in the old days, and most people mainly read about teaching through, about union negotiations in the paper and contract settlements and local budget battles and stuff. So, and they don't know too much about what's going on day to day in the classroom. So I think they get a skewed picture of what the teachers are like in the local area.
I think you're absolutely right. I would just like to still hold to the fact that unions are protecting teachers who are inferior teachers.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
All right. And let's take more calls. Hello. Hi, you're on the air. Hello. Hello. Okay, if you were disconnected for some reason, that last caller, please give us another try. Isham Martin on the WINY talk show, talking today about education. The last caller thinks that unions protect incompetent teachers. Seems to me that that's something that should not be tolerated, that there ought to be a way around that if school administrations are doing a good job in evaluating teachers on a regular basis and working with them. Let me read quickly Governor Florio's story, also short, appearing in the New York Times. Each life has a turning point, a time when perspectives change and priorities are reorganized. Mine came when I earned my general equivalency diploma while I was in the United States Navy. I had dropped out of Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn in 1955. I was 17 and thought I knew all I needed to know, or at least enough to make it on my own. While I've never regretted serving my country, it wasn't long before I realized that I had made a mistake. I had been thinking about becoming a New York City police officer. There was only one problem. I needed a high school diploma. That's when I found that without one, other doors were also closed to me. But I'm a great believer in second chances, and 2 years after I dropped out, the Navy gave me a chance to drop back in. While I was stationed in Key West, Florida, and Kodiak, Alaska, I took correspondence courses, and I earned my GED. It was a turning point, and it taught me a lesson I've never forgotten, that education is just another word for opportunity. Education is just another word for opportunity. In ways, earning my GED was more satisfying than if I had stayed in school. Perhaps putting myself through the trauma of going back to school made me value my diploma so highly, unlike students who stayed in school and in a sense took their diploma for granted. I discovered that with my GED, those doors that had been so firmly closed to me opened easily. The diploma enabled me to continue studying, which I did after I was discharged from the Navy. I enrolled in Trenton State College and earned a bachelor's degree in social studies. My efforts there were rewarded when I was told that I would be a Woodrow Wilson Fellow at Columbia University's Graduate School of Public Law and Government. Later, I went on to earn a degree at Rutgers University Law School. This nation embodies the belief that our talents can take you as far as you wish to go. Your talents. Each succeeding generation tries to go a little further than the past one and pave the way for the next one. That's the story of my family. My grandfather came to the United States from Italy in the early part of this century. He came searching for work and a better life. My father worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I found success through education, and it has taken me far. But it doesn't end there. Last year I watched my daughter graduate from medical school. Who knows what possibilities await a grandchild? The fuel that drives this progress is education, and it has never been more important. In my father's time, one could earn a good living without a formal education. But today, the need for our children to get a world-class education is vital, and it is largely because of my own experience that I have made that goal a priority for my administration. That's Jim Florio. Kathy, which line first? Okay, thank you. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Martin.
Hi.
I'm sorry to get back on your program twice.
I'm happy to have you. Quite all right.
But that last gentleman there speaking on the incompetence of the teachers. Now, if you remember, I think it must be 3 or 4 years ago, I can't remember too well, my memory isn't that good anymore, that the state legislators in Hartford passed a law for the starting salary of teachers at $20,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And on that bill, there was also testing for the teachers, a test.
Yeah.
The teachers union come in and says, we'll take the $20,000, but we will not take the testing. And believe it or not, they got what they wanted.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I don't know the specifics of that, so I really can't comment.
Well, it's been so long now, I kind of lost track of it myself. But I thought that the state legislature was out of, well, I didn't think it was really legal, but they did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they should not be setting the salaries for any industry.
Yeah.
But you're just, a little talk that you just had there a minute ago, previous, was very good. And as I said before,
you know what?
Never hurt anybody.
Thank you very much. I'm out of time. We're out of time. I've got another call that I'm not going to get in. Thanks for joining us on the talk show today. We're going to have the Attorney General tomorrow.